Hi, everyone. Thank you and welcome to this training. So I just going to hand over to Aswin to introduce himself and then start the training then. Thank you, Aswin.
Hello. Hi, everyone. So I'm Ashwin. I work as the NIF Informatics Fellow for the Queensland node of the National Imaging Facility. My main role is on working on software infrastructure for biomedical imaging data management and analysis. And today I'll be talking about the XNAT data management platform, and more specifically, the UQ installation of XNAT and its integration with the Hurston Imaging Facility. HIF is a part of the Queensland node of NIF and is managed by UQ. So that's how we've made this integration happen. Before we proceed, I really want to thank ACCS and HIF for helping organize this talk, especially Sarah and Katie for helping set things up. This service the XNAT service itself would not be possible if it wasn't for a number of partners who have provided co-investment and support. These include the Australian Imaging Service Project, the UQ Research Computing Centre, which runs the service itself, and the National Imaging Facility, which is where I'm from, and also QSIF for providing the cyber infrastructure and the Australian Research Data Commons, or AFDC. So this talk's going to be about an overview of the XNAT data management platform. We're going to talk about some examples of things we can do and the various features that it offers. We might also discuss a bit about the future roadmap for the platform, the UQ instance especially, and some ongoing developments that are happening. There's a couple of points that will be specific to the UQ XNAT and for HIF users and projects, but the general XNAT stuff will be applicable to most XNAT installations. But first, we're just going to talk about the existing data management that HIF uses. Since the end of last year, new projects from HIF have been going directly into the UQ XNAT. If you have a new project at HIF, the data will be sent directly there, and it's going to be the process going forward. Some of you might have used a service known as hif.imaging.org.au. I think sometimes referred to as QRIS because that's the endpoint on the scanners. We'll be decommissioning HIF.imaging later this year. All the existing data that's on HIF.imaging is going to be migrated to XNAT, and this will be done server-side, so there's no user intervention required. The main intention for that service is to provide a download link for your data, and that's going to continue being done, but just with XNAT instead. If you are a user of an existing project, your data will be migrated as is. That means it'll be in the same format as it was on HIF.imaging, which is zips.dicoms. XNAT has its own data structure, which is DICOM based. These migrated projects, we won't be ingesting them directly at first because we don't want to break existing workflows. Rather, we'll have an opt-in option to ingest it into the XNAT data structure on a project-by-project basis. And when this is ready, there'll be documentation available on how to do that ingestion. So general things about XNAT. So XNAT's an open source imaging informatics software platform. Its core functions are to manage the importing, archiving, processing, and secure distribution of imaging and related study data. It was developed by a neuroinformatics research group at Washington University, and it's now supported by flywheel.io. The UQ XNAT, which is what we'll be talking about mostly today, is part of the Australian Imaging Service. It's supported by UQ Research Computing Centre with the help of NIF at Queensland. This is the URL and the documentation for the UQ XNAT. So this is the XNAT that we are referring to. There are multiple instances of XNAT across the world. So we'll be referring to the UQ XNAT from now on. The support channel for all requests will be to RCC support from UQ. So referring to the Australian Imaging Project, so that's a project led by the University of Sydney. It was to standardize and integrate deployments of XNAT platforms across Australia. So these are all the current nodes of the Australian Imaging Service. And this project is basically building up a distribution of what we call enhanced XNATs. The project's still ongoing, so the nodes are at like various stages of their deployments. And the UQ node has been in production since end of last year. So this is a small introduction on how to get started on the XNAT, especially for HIF user. So signing in is via AAF. This is enforced across the board. So AAF is a federated authentication service used by Australian universities and various research organizations. And we do have a process for users within organizations that are not already affiliated with AAF. We'll talk about that shortly. There's three general category of users we deal with: UQ users, non-UQ AF members, and the non-AF members themselves. The UQ members log in using AAF, but their project request process is a bit different from the others because they need to request a UQ RDM collection, which is a service provided by UQ. Then they have their XNAT project connected to that RDM collection. This is all done via support tickets to RCC. The process for this is fully documented on the docs page, so that's the best place to find this information. Other AF members will usually involve people from other Queensland universities like QUT, Griffith, CQU, etc., as well as CSIRO and QSIF and universities across Australia. Signing in is using your AF account. If you have a HIF project, the facility will request the project on your behalf on a specified HIF collection that is dedicated for these external users. Some AF organizations have access restrictions to services outside their domain, like certain health boards. Like if you were New South Wales Health and you try to log in, they'll probably block the UQ XNAT. So even if you have it on the AF list, if you have a sort of error in login, then just send a support ticket and go via the non-AF member process, because that's what we'll have to use for those users. When you're added to a project, you'll receive an email from XNAT, and the turnaround is a couple of days. So if you've not got project access within like 5 days, usually contact support. So non-AF users have to use a slightly different process. This usually involves non-university members of TRI, QIMR, QLD Health, and some of the radiology clinics. They have to sign up for what's called an AF virtual home account. So all they do is submit a ticket to RCC support requesting for an AF account to access the XNAT. They'll be sent a AF virtual home account sign-up process, and this AF account is sponsored by QSIF. And then they can use that account that they generate for AF login. And remember, when you have an AF virtual home account, from the drop-down list, you'll have to select AF virtual home instead of other organizations that you might be associated with. Also remember that browsers cache your AF login. So sometimes you might have to either remove the cache or use a private window in case the center login panel doesn't come with the option to choose the virtual home. And just like before, the facility will request your project for you. So
before you go on,
yeah, sure.
Is there a reason why you can't? So you can actually access your UQ RDM using other methods. You can set up your either a private personal account, or you can use EduGain, or you can use LinkedIn. Why is that not possible with the XNAT?
We haven't extended it out to the others, but AIS uses AF as a federated authentication across the board. And the virtual home account covers for any scenario that we've got at the moment. So it's not something we've looked into, especially because I think any member who logs into XNAT will have a very technical level of usage versus RDM, which might be more dealing with documents and just sharing. So they probably need the full login extent. So we'll now look at XNAT projects. So projects are core of XNAT. So when you log in, you'll have a list of projects that you have access to. Remember, when you log in for the first time, you'll usually not have access to any projects because your user account would have just been created. So the facility will have to add you to your project. All data sets have to go into projects. User access is controlled at the project level, and there'll be a project list on the left. I think we've got a question. I'll quickly address that. So I think there's some issues with some login errors first time, even though with the correct password. There is some causes of these kind of problems, but I'd recommend if you have a login error, please send a support ticket because we'll be able to track it and see what's going on. And we do have logs that can see what happened.
It's also a good idea to do a quick screenshot so you can see the kind of error message
Oh, yeah.
getting, and then just email that and just.
Yeah, that'll be perfect. So just take a screenshot and send it through a support ticket and we'll be able to address it. Because there's a variety of reasons that can cause login errors. So a project will have a project title, ID, and aliases. External clients will usually require project ID or project titles to find your project. You can fill in, as a user, you can fill in your project description to better capture metadata. And project title, project IDs, and aliases are used by the automated data transfer process we have at OHIF. So don't change these values because it'll probably break the data transfer and we'll have to fix it afterwards. For user access, there's a couple of details. So a project owner can add users by entering the email or username into the panel on the left from the access panel. They can select from a list in the middle as well. They'll have all the users signed into XNAT. The user will receive an email notification regarding project access. And if you need access to a project, just contact the project owner or the facility or support, and they'll be able to arrange it. When adding a user, you'll have to assign them a role, and there are 3 different roles in XNAT. So we'll just have a quick look at the roles. If you requested a project, you'll usually be assigned as the owner. So an owner, all 3 roles can read, download, and download data, but only owners can create and update data, and only owners can delete data. So basically, collaborators have read-only access, members have read and write access, whereas owners have read, write, and delete access. So in terms of managing users, only owners can add or remove users from their project or change their roles from members to collaborators, etc. So the support email that you want to use is rcc-support@uq.edu.au. I think there was a question in the Q&A. Actually, if you're a user for a while, there was an older link to a QSIP support link, but it's changed. It's now supported by RCC. If QSIP needs to be involved, it goes via the RCC support channel. And the next section is on subjects and sessions. So looking at subject and session management. XNAT maps biomedical imaging data pretty one-to-one to its data structure. So when we look at projects, subjects, and sessions and scans, it uses the exact same terminology for clinical data, especially. The project page will have a list of subjects. If we click on through, it'll take us to the subject page. Subjects will have associated metadata that's extracted from the DICOM headers. This particular subject didn't have birth year information, but if it did, it wouldn't be there as well. And you can actually edit subjects from the edit panel on the right. Once you go there, you can change the subject ID. Sometimes data does get uploaded with the wrong subject information or things have changed, and this is the best place to modify it. So if your data set has incorrect subject name or needs to be corrected, this is where you'll do it. When you click modify, you'll have to submit it, and it does take a bit of time to take effect because it's moving data on the server. So just watch out for that. If you have a project level anonymizer, which we'll talk about later, it can take a little bit longer as well. So just taking that into account. So the actual data is stored in sessions. So that's what we'll be talking about for most of the time. Sessions are divided into MR, CT, and PET sessions. The modality is extracted from DICOM metadata automatically. So there's nothing to do there. And the 3 sessions behave pretty much the same in terms of user interface and things like that. And we're just going to look at MR session for today. I think we've got a question about the subject editing. So when you edit the subject, it doesn't change the DICOM headers, and it also doesn't do it for the sessions unless you use a project level anonymizer. So we'll have a look at that later. So on the sessions, you can edit a session same as with a subject. There's a couple of differences. You can go to the session editor and move it to a different project or move it to a different subject. When you click the subject edit option, you'll actually get an option to also create a new subject. So if your MR session needs to be in a new subject entirely, you can just do it from there. So in just one click. So the session editor is probably the best place to move your data around. So if your data is uploaded with an invalid or blank session name, you can fix those details here, as well as add other metadata that's missing. The scans themselves are listed at the bottom with the relevant series descriptions and other information. If you hover over one of them, and click the highlighted view details button, this will open a more detailed and like an image preview window. So we'll just have a look. So I think even if you click on the number, it'll actually open this window. On the left is what you'll get. You'll get a preview snapshot of the image, and there's an option to view DICOM headers, and you can see the full set of DICOM text for that scan from here as well, which is shown on the right. Moving on to search, this is pretty straightforward. You can search across projects, subjects, or sessions, and the sessions are broken up into MR, PET, and CT. Basically, just fill a couple of the fields and do a search. You don't even have to fill all the fields, and XNAT will spit out a list of search results, and you can find what you're looking for. We'll have a quick look at the specific mechanisms of the OHIF to XNAT transfer. So at OHIF, we'll have an operator usually scan a patient, and they'll add the project name to the referring physician name field in the DICOM headers and the subject ID to the patient ID field. This subject ID would be the de-identified one, so not the actual patient name. They'll run a send to XNAT function. This actually doesn't send the data directly to XNAT. It sends it to a client that's running on OHIF that does the on-site anonymization. So that strips a lot of the identifiable tags or information we don't want on the research cloud. The client will then transfer the data set to the XNAT server via HTTPS encrypted channel. And that's another reason we do this, is because DICOM protocol on most scanners can't do encrypted transfer. So we do the DICOM transfer within the site and do a HTTPS encrypted connection to the XNAT server. And then you'll have the data accessible from XNAT. This is the on-site anonymization that's done at OHIF and most of the sites that I work with. All the tags on the left are blanked. We don't delete any tags because some tools require tags to exist even if they don't use the values. Otherwise they don't recognize the DICOM as valid. So we just set the value to empty or blank. The 5 tags on the right are modified, so they're not deleted or they're not wiped. What happens is for the patient birth date, we override the day and the month to 1/1. And actually, I think some of our older data sets has this wiped, but we've changed the process sometime last year. The referring physician name contains the project. Patient name actually contains the research subject ID, and we do a modification of the patient ID and make it into the subject ID tagged with a study date time appended to the end. The reason for this is to prevent dataset collisions, because often a lot of datasets are acquired with identical patient names or subject IDs, and they get resent, but they're actually different sessions. And there's not many effective ways of differentiating them except for timestamps or other factors. So we use study date time appended to the session. The OHIF on-site anonymizer runs by default on all datasets sent to XNAT. So if your project requires any of these blanked or modified tags to be set differently, and you have approval for storing it on the research cloud, please let your contact at OHIF know so we can arrange for a project-specific exception. We have to do an on-site change on anonymizer, but it is possible on a subject-to-subject basis. So it's general things is if you're in a project team and want access to your project, contact your lead. So they'll add you if they're the project owner. The data transfer has a minimum of about 30 to 2 hours, depending on how much load there is on the transfer. This is because it can't even be shorter than 30 minutes because we need to leave the data on the server for about 30 minutes to even see if new data is coming in or not, because there's no clear way to tell whether DICOM transfers completed an entire scan except for the time heuristic. It can sometimes take a bit longer, so just allow about 24 hours for transfer, but after that, it's likely that something's stalled on the chain, so just contact your facility or support. Always try and check and verify your data sets, especially if it involves new studies and protocols. One of the focuses of the service is not just to keep data in a more secure, organized environment compared to consumer flash drives and hard disks, but it's to make it easier to validate and inspect your data. Like you can click the session, just see the DICOM headers and see whether scans are missing or not. And it's highly recommended to take advantage of this. There is multiple layers of redundancy in our data movement chain, but all recovery operations are easier if an issue is raised really early on versus months or years down the line. It's much harder to recover data at that point.
So I would say for her that we're only going to keep it on the scanner for 2 weeks. We don't have the space to store it longer than that. So we'll assume if you haven't told us that it's up in the cloud, because we can't see it now that it's in XNAT. So you really do need to check your data within those 2 weeks and tell us that you don't have something.
Yep. I'll just repeat that. So from the HERP point of view, they'll store the data on the scanner for about 2 weeks because the scanner will run out of space and there'll be a lot of issues then. So if you can't alert that a data has been affected within 2 weeks, it will be very difficult to do any kind of recovery operation. I'll just address one of these questions. So I think someone asked whether something's typed in by the radiographer. Yes, the project name and the subject ID are typed in by the radiographer or operator. So they'll be managing that. That is actually the only way we can tell what project or subject it is, because once it leaves the scanner, there's no way we can identify it.
So the radiographer does get that information in the referral. So it's whatever you said the subject ID is, whatever your code is. Yeah,
okay. So that's provided by the referral, and the radiographer types that in and does a send to XNAT operation. And after that, the automated transfer pipeline takes over. If a data set is sent without some key information, or if it's incorrect, it will still end up on XNAT because we want to move data off of the facility as soon as possible and not have data backed up on the facility because our on-site storage is way more limited than the cloud service. All that happens is it gets stuck in the pre-archive and we have to do some manual intervention to get it onto the right project, which is possible, but it's not preferred. So that's actually a good lead up to the pre-archive. So that's one of the functions of what's called the XNAT pre-archive. If a data set gets sent with invalid project information, or if a DICOM data set gets sent, for instance, twice, or a partial data set gets sent and then a more complete one gets sent later within like over a 1 hour window, it will cause a data set collision. This doesn't stop the pipeline. All that happens is XNAT triages it into what's called its pre-archive. So if you're expecting a data set to have arrived and it has not, it's most likely in the XNAT pre-archive. To access a pre-archive, you can go to the upload button on the top and go to pre-archive. This will let, as a user, this will let you see projects that have data sets that have been assigned the right project, but have conflicting data set information that is colliding. So this is usually happens if you have duplicate data or a partial data set transfer followed by another partial data set transfer. You can actually inspect this here and go to by just going to the details section and see what's basically happened. So you can inspect the data set and decide what's best to do. So if XNAT can merge the data sets, it won't overwrite the same file, but it does a merge operation. So it will combine data sets together. If the new data set you actually wanted it named differently, or it's actually a different session, you can actually rename it and resend it via here. And that way it'll be kept separate from the one that's existing on the server. And if your data set was sent without the project information, you won't have access to it on the pre-archive, only the admins will. So if it's there, we'll have to have a look at it. And we look into the pre-archive every couple of weeks or every few days because it's on a caching disk and not on the long-term storage. So we can't have it fill up. So if you see data sets accumulating, we'll probably send you an email and ask what we should do with the conflicting data. I might just take a break. Might have a quick look at anonymizers. There is a number of anonymizers in the OHIF to XNAT process. So this is probably all of the anonymizers available. The first one is the one we talked about, which is the OHIF on-site anonymizer. So we'll follow through to the next one. XNAT has a site-wide anonymizer that enforces anonymization across all data uploaded onto it. And we do not enable this on the UQ XNAT. So this does not run. So if you see documentation about site-wide anonymization, this doesn't apply to the UQ one. Optionally, you can use a project level anonymizer, which can edit DICOM tags before they're archived into the project. And there's also a separate anonymizer for XSync, which is a plugin that lets you sync from XNAT to XNAT. The project level anonymizer can actually be used to modify or reassign your DICOM tags. It uses a syntax called DICOM edit. There's a lot of documentation on how to use DICOM edit at that link. This example here on the left is a replica of the OHIF anonymization for remapping referring physician name. So that's probably how an anonymization script will look at the end once you've sort of figured out what to do. You can use DICOM edit to enforce your naming sequence for your project and tagging in specific ways that your project requires. So we can still have OHIF use its on-site anonymization process, but then you have your project specific one that applies to your project in case you want things renamed differently. If you're unsure, if you want to use the project level anonymizer, but unsure on how to start with DICOM edit, just happy to get in touch and we should be able to help you out. So just let us know. I might just quickly address this question. So if there's no project data, how do you know how one owns the data on the pre-archive? Project data that's uploaded, so data sets that are uploaded without proper project information do not get labeled with any project, so users can't see it. You can only see pre-archive data sets that you have access to. So the ones a user can see will be things that have data set collision, so there'll be partial data sets. The ones that don't have project data will be called unknown data sets, and that's something that admins will have to figure out. And they can use the pre-archive to assign a project once they've identified where it was supposed to go. So
an example of that, just for everybody, is if the your XNAT code is like this one, QUT-RT or capitals, and we put QUT_RT, that is not a recognized XNAT, and it will go to the pre-archive. Yeah, unknown project.
Yeah, that's correct. So QUT-RT, if that was mistyped as QUT_RT, it'll go to the pre-archive. We can add QUT-RT as an alias into your project, which will send future data into the right spot. But actually minimizing the number of aliases is probably best for the platform. But it's not that data doesn't disappear down a black hole. We do have a mechanism to get onto XNAT as soon as possible, but we can't let the pre-archive fill up because it's not on secured long-term data storage. So coming back to the project level anonymizer, the project level anonymizer works best with new sessions because it runs when the data set is ingested into the archive or when a session's renamed. It doesn't, if you just put in an anonymization script and enable it, it won't actually execute on the existing sessions. There is a workaround. You can actually rename your sessions and rename them back. It'll trigger the anonymization twice and it'll fix it. This is not ideal, but it can be done. So it's best to plan ahead for if you want to use this function. So if you have a naming scheme or an anonymization process you want for your project, before data acquisition, it's best to plan how you want that to work and either test it with the anonymizer or get in touch with us to set up an anonymization script and have it happen before data acquisition, because it's just a lot faster and easier to do it that way. So I might look at managing files. So far, everything we've been talking about is regarding DICOM data. So this is more to do with other types of data or arbitrary files. There's two things we're going to look at, and I might actually just look through them live. So so this is about uploading any files, and we're going to look at something called the manage files option and the resource uploader. So this is, I wonder if anyone can. Can everyone see this screen?
Yep.
Okay. So this is a user acceptance testing instance, so not the actual production side. So we're just going to go into this test MR data set over here. So over here, you'll have an option called manage files. I'll just be talking about the session one for now. I'll talk about the project and subject ones later. So if you click here, you'll notice that all the scan information that we have here. So I might just delete that for the time being. All the scan files are all here, just like they over here. So that's actually the directories and files that are stored in this session. If you want to add a file that's, say, a raw data file, so all you have to do is go to manage files and add a folder. So we add a folder. You want to choose whether it goes into a scan or a resource. So a resource applies to the whole session, whereas a scan would be in one of these scans. So it'll be a subfolder in one of the scans. So we're going to do a resource first, and we'll have to name the folder something. So let's pretend it's raw data. So let's go, actually, maybe, and do create. And if you notice, it'll come under a resource folder over here. So then if you want to upload a file, you click upload files, go here and go to resources, and you'll have a raw option here. Then you can go and browse and find the file from your computer. Let's push this here and then click upload. So that puts the file into there. So this is at the session level. So because XNAT works natively with DICOM, you can't quite see any sort of native viewing or preview or metadata extraction from this on its own. You'll need to extra plugins or scripts to manage that. So you'll always be able to see the data here, and you'll also be able to download it. So I'll show you the download stuff later, but that's about that. If you want to actually attach it to a particular scan, let's just say we want to put a T1 raw data attached to this one. Let's go to add folders here, go to scans, select the scan that you want. So we want series number 7, and let's call it raw as well. So this generates the raw data in this folder here, and then you can upload the scan. T1 more. Yeah, so that's just an example of how to use the manage files interface. One of the issues with this is I think if a project needs this, it probably needs it repeatedly for a number of sessions. So we're going to look at the custom resource importer after this, which makes this a lot more streamlined. I'll quickly just talk about another thing here first. So this is the manage files for the session. Just be aware that the manage files for the session and the one from the subject and the one for the project are all completely separate. So if you go to manage files on the subject, there's nothing here. This is because this is the files for the subject. So this only works across the subject. So if we say create a folder called subject resource, and we go up to the project. Let me hit that again. There's nothing here. And if we go here and we go and create project resource, Yeah, so subject and project resources are separate, and that too from session resources. I'm guessing most users would be looking at session resources for day-to-day operation. So we'll look at something called the custom resource uploader next. So suppose I want to repeatedly upload raw data to either the session or the individual scan. What we do is we create a custom resource uploader. So you have to go to the project for this and go to the Manage tab, scroll down and find Project Resource Settings. Click this and click Start. So over here, just ignore these three and this one here, and just look at these two. So we're going to do one for the image session first. So let's say this is, let's do something different. Let's say it's Spectra, I guess. So Spectra, and create a directory here. So you'll need to fill in this and that, and the others are all optional. This can select which type of session it applies to. And you can have it extract compressed files by default and just add this. So we'll create this entry here. Now let's go down to the session again, and something new will have appeared, which is, that's the subject. We'll have a new option called upload additional files. And this only happens if your project has a project level uploader. If you click this, now there is a single form to upload Spectra data. So this is a much more streamlined way of doing this at a systematic level. So now we can just click this and do that. And now if you go to manage files, this has put it into the right spot. Let's just do one more, but this one for scan. Okay. So we're going to go to scan. This time we're going to add, let's add another raw file. So raw data, and we'll call it raw. Add. Maybe close it from here. Now, if we go into the session, and go to upload additional, oh no, the scan one's not here. This is for the session. The scan one appears here. So you have to go to the individual scan and click this arrow for upload resource. So before we set this up, there would have only been a data download and a delete. So now we click this and we've got the option for raw data. If we upload the file here, or T1 raw again, I think we've already done that. So it's duplicate. So let's try it on a different one. I think it'll reload the page. And now if you notice, this data set now has a raw data file as well. And obviously this is just filler data. So this is a more streamlined way of doing it at a project level. I think that's about it there. Okay, so there's two questions. One's, can I upload Twix data this way? The answer is yes. There's a caveat. I'll address that at the end of the talk. Is there a way to automatically upload raw data and attach it to a scan? You can do it via this. This is a manual mechanism. So, but you can set it, the uploader, custom uploader for your scans. So now it is manual, but you can do it more streamlined. That's the only option at the moment. And we are looking into options to do automated upload from the site, but that's not in production yet. Okay, so next we'll have a look at viewing images. So the key thing we're going to talk about is the OHIF image viewer. So AIS XNAT instances come with the XNAT OHIF image viewer, which is a plugin developed by the Institute of Cancer Research in London. Just note, if your publication uses this viewer, they have an article for citation. So the link above will have all the information about this. To access the viewer, all we have to do is go to a session and click view image. There's a second entry called views legacy viewer. Just disregard that one. That's just for some legacy projects. The viewer looks like this, but I think we're just going to do a quick live demo of the viewer. So let's have a quick look. We'll look at the same session. So it's right here, view images. If we click this, it'll spawn the OHIF viewer. Yeah, so you can scroll through all of your sequences here. So we can switch. Actually, let's use this one. There's a whole set of options. It's a pretty detailed program. So we'll just go through a brief look at it actually. You can use the scroll wheel to get through the slices. And I think you can scroll through them with your scroll wheel as well. You can change the contrast levels and zoom. Reset the image. You can draw annotations, so we can get length annotations. And things like that. When you have, say, a set of annotations you want to snapshot and download, you go to commands and go to snapshot. This lets you download it as a JPEG, for instance. So you can just download it and we'll have the image on our computer. There's also a .com tag browser and support for 3D MPR. The last two are a bit interesting because they have to do with XNAT storage as well. So let's have a look at those. So you can draw contour masks. So let's just do a quick one. And you press escape. There we go. And you can export this ROI into your XNAT collection. So test ROI. I think it's here, actually. Test ROI collection. After you give the names, just click export and export selected. When you do this, you'll get a green notification when it's done. Now, let's actually just exit the XNAT session, the OHIF viewer session, and go back to the session. The ROI is saved as an assessor into your collection. So this is preserved onto your repository, and you can even see the file here. There it is. This also means you can import that ROI back in later on. So this, you can actually use this as a persistent ROI storage. So let's go to contours again. Import, and it's back in. So that's contours, and the same thing can be done for masks-based ROIs as well. I think if we scroll through this, we'll find it. Oh, there it is. Yep, so we've got it back. Okay, so that's a general overview of the OHIF viewer. Obviously, it's a pretty advanced program, so there's a lot of things to it, but it's a brief look. This is the link to further documentation about OHIF and how to use it. So there's more information online, and that'll be the best place to have a look. I think I'll probably address this question. So do you recommend we use XNAT as a long-term data repository or as a transfer system? This is a bit tricky. So it has a couple of caveats. So for first thing, so this is the UQ AIS XNAT. So for UQ users, we would recommend this as the long-term data repository, and for imaging data to be in XNAT. So that's where we'd advise to go. For non-UQ users, there's a lot of factors to consider. For HIF users, this is the long-term primary data storage site, and we don't currently support the usage of storing derived data back into the system for non-UQ users using their default HIF collection. If you require collection, I think you'll have to get in touch with us and we'll see what to do on a case-by-case basis, because it depends on your organization and what kind of access you have. More fundamentally, I think we need to see if we have access to Chris Cloud collections, because we can support Chris Cloud collections backing an XNAT project. So we'll have to do that on a case-by-case basis. But yeah, that's what it. How long can we store data in XNAT? I think besides it has a traditional seven years of research data storage. Our storage is backed by Chris Cloud and UQRDM basically. So that would be the short answer. But the primary data can be stored as long as UQRDM or Chris Cloud collections can store them. There is longitudinal backup of the data. This is based on the Chris Cloud or RDM Medici layered HSM type tiered storage. So there is ways of recovering deleted data via recovery operations. Basically, there's a 3-layered storage. The top's a cache layer that does fast data access. There's a middle 0-watt disk storage that helps with intermediate data, and data gets stored back into tape for long term as well. So it can be recovered. So we'll look at something called alias tokens. So AF is used for logging into the XNAT website, but there's a lot of systems that need external access to XNAT, and that's where alias tokens come in. These systems will include things like Windows or Mac desktop clients like XNAT Desktop, command line tools like XNAT utils, XNAT Pi or Pi XNAT, and things like that. And even XSync, which we use to sync from XNAT to XNAT, will need some sort of external token. Alias token is the term that XNAT uses. It's similar to basically an API token if you're familiar with APIs. An alias token is basically a temporarily generated long randomized username and password. So that can be generated and revoked easily. So let's just look at how to create one. So basically when you log into XNAT, on the top right, near the logout button will be your username, or actually your name, not even the username itself. Just click that, you'll end up in your user profile. And then there'll be a manage alias tokens option on the left side. So just click that, and then you'll be able to create an alias token. When you create it, it'll appear as a new entry. The UQ XNAT has alias tokens expire in 60 days after creation, and the expiry date will be human readable in that column. If you can have multiple alias tokens, and it can be deleted and created as needed, and if you need to revoke permissions and things, each one will be randomized, the alias and the secret. We'll have a look at the details of each one now. So the key there's a bunch of details on this table, but the 2 key attributes we need to look at is the alias and the secret. Basically, the alias is your username and the secret's your password. You can use alias and secret to substitute your username and password on external clients. Actually, performance-wise, it's recommended to use alias and secrets versus username and passwords due to the way the XNAT server authenticates. It's more efficient on the API access front rather than the user authentication front. So even they recommended this for performance reasons. And on our AF-based accounts, you can't do a direct username password anyway. So we don't even allow that. But just note, alias and secrets are effectively a temporary set of login credentials. So do not reveal your secret. It's basically your password. So if you don't need it, just delete the token. And if you think your secret's been compromised, revoke the alias token as soon as possible. So downloading data. So you can download from any page. Yeah.
Why would you need an alias?
If
So you've got your alias.
So the AF lets you do anything on the website. If you have anything that needs to connect to XNAT but not using the website, it will need it.
So it's for scripts and things.
It'll be for scripts and things. We'll actually have a look at a desktop client for downloading data as well. They'll also need it. If you use XSync, which we'll have a quick chat about, that also can use alias tokens instead. If you're a power user and you want to use XNAT Pi, XNAT, which are very powerful tools, and it can get you a lot of effective work, they're best used with alias tokens as well. So for downloading images, you can download images from project, subject, or the session page. There'll be a download images option. First, looking at zip download, so you can filter out any of the columns and get exactly what you're looking for. And just click download and make sure zip download is enabled. That'd be the second option. It'll usually default to the client, so you'll just have to change it. There'll also be simplify downloaded archive structure ticked by default, but we'd recommend unticking it because the problem is the default mechanism, it doesn't keep your scan names on the folder. It gives them a series of numbers. So just make sure to untick it before you download. Then you'll get a series of folders like this, which is more easily readable. You can download any individual scan. Just go to the session itself and find the little download button next to the scan, and you'll get it. Okay, so will alias and secrets continue to work after AF user and password access is revoked? That is a good question, actually. I think technically no, but that might be something we'll have to correct due to the way the authentication works. If your user account in XNAT is disabled, your alias token will not work. I think someone raised in the registration form, someone raised an issue with downloading scans, and which might sometimes be due to browser caches and problems like that. I'd like to thank everyone for submitting those questions. They're very useful to help inform some of the presentation. So another option you can do is to use what's called the XNAT data client. XNAT desktop client. So this is a client that's maintained by the XNAT development team. So we're just showing how it works. Basically, when you go to the first option, sorry, I'll go to the previous slide. So just go to the site and download the correct client for your operating system and install it. It's just a typical installer. If you want to, when you download from the site, just use the first option instead of the zip downloads. It'll pop up a second screen and then just approve it and access that. And then here you can choose your download location on the second option. The first one will say select XML file. This is just the way XNAT communicates. So when XNAT talks to some clients, it generates an XML file list for them to know what to download. So there's just intermediate file that the client uses. There's nothing that we have to work with. And then the client will be able to download it. It tends to work better for downloads that have unstable connections or need to be restarted. But yeah, your mileage may vary depending on your connection. For HPC, there's a tool called XNAT Utils. It's maintained by the Australian Imaging Service. So it's a simplified tool for quickly accessing your project list and downloading files. I won't go too much into details. It's basically a Python package. You just have to pip install XNAT Utils into whatever HPC or Linux workstation or anything that supports Python. So it's cross-platform. It authenticates using what's called a .NET-RC file in your home directory. So all you have to do is create a .NET-RC file. Just put these three values in. So use the machine as the XNAT domain URL. For your user, use your alias and the alias token, and for password, use your secret. The good thing about the .NET-RC is there's another application called XNAT Pi which also uses it. So when you update your alias token, you just have to change the .NET-RC and it'll just upgrade across the board. So it's not limited to each script. So in XNAT, utils has a bunch of commands to pull or see data and list and rename and things like that. It's actually a bit of a wrapper around a bigger tool called XNAT Pi. So it's based on it. And XNAT Pi has a lot more functionality. It uses a very Pythonic way of connecting to XNAT and dealing with projects and various resources. There's also another popular one called PyXNAT. You can have a look at that. That uses more of a REST API type of workflow. Yeah. So we'll have a look at pipelines. I might just quickly address this question. What kind of download speed should we expect? That is a tough question to answer, I think. Yeah. The service is hosted on Chris Cloud, on a Chris Cloud server provided by Nectar. So whatever throughput we can put via that service is basically it. And it also depends on your download speed connections. So yeah. I definitely recommend, if you're having large downloads, going via XNAT desktop, or the utils is probably better for large data, because the API access route is just more stable and better than the browser-based one if you need large amounts of data moved. So we have pipelines are a bit new to the UQX now. We've just enabled one at the moment, so we're going forward with more pipelines into the future. Basically, what this means is you can run what's a prepackaged Docker container that is approved by the admin on your data, and have it do some processing with whatever tools you can wrap into your Docker container and put the data back into your project. That's essentially what a pipeline is. To enable a pipeline, you go to your project and go to project settings. There's a pipeline tab, just ignore that one. It's by project settings. You'll see a list of pipelines that are enabled on the XNAT server. Currently, we have DICOM to Nifty, so we'll just have a look at that one. So just enable it for your project. You have to enable it at a project level. Then navigate to one of your sessions. There'll be a new arrow on the side saying run, and there'll be a new batch operation called run container. If you click the arrow, if you hover over the arrow on the right, it will tell you the list of pipelines that can be executed. And then if you want to use the batch process, you can tick the checkboxes on the left and use run container from the bulk actions. So we'll do DICOM to Nifty. It'll pop up a new window. This is basically a window that's determined by the pipeline and how it's written. So this is a bunch of user options and switches that can be done, and that has to be done by at the pipeline level itself. So whoever wrote the pipeline has to incorporate these things. So basically, the other options will let you choose some flags for DICOM to Nifty to do a slightly different operation. Once you run it, there'll be an active process on the top when your page reloads. That means there's an ongoing pipeline that hasn't completed. If you refresh and it disappears, that means it's finished. And if it says something about failed, that means the pipeline has failed. If you scroll down to the bottom, XNAT has a history of all the actions that's been done on the session. And pipelines usually appear on this quite commonly. So you can see whether pipelines run completed or things like that. And then if we go into the manage files, you'll have access to your data. So DICOM to Nifty ran on this T1 and generated a Nifty folder and populated that with the data. This was entirely done by the pipeline. We didn't have any intervention. So XSync is a way to synchronize, it's a plugin maintained by the XNAT dev team, and it's installed on XNAT servers. XSync can synchronize between different XNAT instances. It does this on a project-to-project basis, so you have to specify a source and a target project on the different XNATs. You can actually use this to sync projects within the same XNAT as well. You just have to pick the same URL. And actually, we've had a few cases where this was useful. You can set it to run on a schedule, like daily, weekly, etc. And you can disable the scheduling and run it on demand. So you can just have it set up and then run it just when you want the XSync to run. When you use the on-demand option, you can also just sync a single session. You don't have to do the entire project. The schedule one has to do on a project level. If you're interested in XSync, the best way is actually to contact your respective XNAT admins, the source and the target ones, because and let them know which URL you want to sync between. This is because there is some XSync version and compatibility things to take into account, because there's a compatibility table. Since it's a plugin, some sites don't have it installed, and some of them have policies on usage. So it's best to go via the support channels. We've already had some XSync requests in the past year, and they've all been set up with actually very little issues. So It's just let us know if you want to sync from an XNAT to another XNAT, and all AIS XNATs should have xsync.
So just where we've used it already is the big multi-site trials where maybe Monash is collecting all the data from various sites, so we can just sync it over, so it's all automatic and then just pop up in the XNAT and the classroom.
Yeah. So we've done it for multi-site trials, and so we've done it to, I think, Perth, and to a couple to Sydney, I think, as well. We've actually used it for a project for a different XNAT where we created a project for some external sites to upload data, but we didn't want them to have access to the full project. So they have a bucket which they upload to, and then that syncs it onto the master project that contains the data for the whole project. So this is a common use case for multiple projects and using xsync to mix them together. Let's just look at a few of the questions for the time being. When you run a pipeline, you'll get an email notification if it runs successfully or if it terminates. So it does give you full notifications. You can run a pipeline across all sessions. I think you can. Oh, you can automate pipeline runs. So you can have, actually, we do have a bit of time, so I'll quickly show you the pipeline in place. So let's just run a pipeline live on, say, this one here. So if we run this, we'll get this window here, run container. It'll give you this container work ID launch window. If we click OK, and let's just refresh this page. I think it ran too quickly. So it's already finished. Yeah, there we go. Now, if you go to manage files, the third one will now have it'll be a nifty. There it is. It's right there. So this folder and this file is just created. The pipeline is completely extendable. So if you can do anything that your Docker container can actually write. Let's hop into the project settings. So if you go to command automation, you can actually get pipelines to run on events. So when a session gets archived or merged, you can get it to run this pipeline, for instance. We've limited this at the moment because we have to scale our pipeline node. We actually just got approval for a larger node. So what will likely happen is we'll scale it up. I'll talk about that in a bit. So, but this is how to automate a pipeline run. So you can have it run for all newly merged sessions and things like that. I don't think we use this. And there's a command history of all the pipelines that run on your system. I haven't used it yet, but I'm pretty sure you can control pipeline execution from the API, but I'll have to check on that. There was another question. To use the XNAT desktop client, we need to enter XNAT server, our username and password. So that's where the alias tokens come in. The XNAT server address is xnat.rcc.uq.edu.au, but username and password, you'll have to use an alias token. So you generate an alias token and use the alias and the secret. The alias tokens last for 60 days, and you can just generate a new one and use that from then on. Okay, so this is a slightly side note. So this is about analysis. Especially across HERF, we have a variety of users and they have access to various different infrastructures. So we won't talk too much onto the different infrastructures. Basically, you can pull your data in using the browser, XNAT utils, and all the various clients and services. But any user of our service will have access to the Nectar virtual desktop service. So we recommend looking at that if you're not sure about analysis. I won't go too much details, but basically it's a service provided by ARDC. It'll start a Linux virtual desktop powered by the research cloud, and a typical virtual desktop lives for about 14 days, and then you can extend it if you need a longer service. You can boost its resource quota as well if you need more power for a 7-day period. And all you need is an AF account. So, and this will also work with AF virtual home accounts. In that, I'd particularly look at Neuro Desktop because it has a bunch of pre-built biomedical imaging tools already. There's a huge list. You can look into the project from that link, so I won't go into details. And it's basically a Linux virtual desktop, but it's a full GUI, and you can have your analysis and processing done there. You will be asked about an availability zone. You can choose anything that is close to your site, but just be note that the UQRS XNAT is hosted on QuizCard. So it will have the best server connection to the QuizCard server from internally. So now on to some future development. So the first thing we're going to look at next is updating the documentation with a lot of this information. So our documentation has some of this, but not all of this. So we're gonna put a lot of that there. There's one thing I didn't mention. So we currently have a 4 gig file upload limit on both the manage files and the resource uploader options. So if you're uploading a single file via the web GUI, it's limited to 4 gigs due to server-side limitation. And the first thing I'm going to do is actually, we're going to raise that. So we're planning, sorry, let me just go back. We're planning a scheduled outage in about 2 to 3 weeks to do a server upgrade. And in that, we'll also increase the caching space for that. And that should remove this 4 gig limit to something that will support most raw data and larger files. If you're signed into XNAT, we'll send this information in the outage notice as well, so you'll know. Over the next few months, we'll be migrating the HIF.imaging projects across to XNAT. So we've already started some of this for some of the projects, so we'll be doing for more. We are looking at increasing our pipeline node capacity. So currently it's limited, and we can only really run one pipeline at the moment. So we're going to scale that up to something much larger. And we just we've got allocated for more nodes at the moment. We're also looking at developing more pipelines. So Australian Imaging Service has a pipelines development team, and we are building out more pipelines. They already have 3 online. I think it's MRI QC, fMRI prep, and SMRI prep. So once we scale up our pipeline node, we're going to start installing them in, probably starting with MRI QC, and we'll probably start installing more pipelines that will be accessible to the users. Long term, we are looking at automated upload for raw data. It's been a common request. There is some challenges in that doing it on an operational level. So we're looking into that option, and native support for non-DICOM data. It's been a strong interest. So we're going to see what we can do on that front. There's a couple of clients and things that can sort of do a bit of this work, but we have to test this on our server. There's also ongoing development to integrate the Neuro Desktop environment that we talked about with the Nectar BDS into XNAT. And that's a project that is funded to deliver this by end of this year. So that will allow a user to launch a virtual desktop from XNAT and have the XNAT data mounted. So that might be something we'll post some updates about later this year if once it's in production. We received a bunch of questions, so I might just cover some of these. So the first question was, can XNAT support more than DICOM? XNAT can support any file via the project subject and session resources. It's just that by default, it has to be uploaded manually via the manage files interface or the resource uploaders. Any of these files can be accessed by the pipeline engine, so there's no limitations there. But features like the viewer and automated metadata extraction that's inbuilt it doesn't work for it. That's the only catch. So those need either plugins or external clients to happen. So non-DICOM data automatic ingestion is something we're looking at. It's only manual at the moment. There was a question about, does it automatically collect data from instruments? This is a bit tricky, so I'll try and break this down. The way we do it at HIF and the other sites is we use a client called the RSNA CTP, which does the on-site anonymization. XNAT comes with a DICOM SCP receiver, and that's the way to automatically transfer data onto XNAT. But note that DICOM is most commonly an unencrypted channel. There's encrypted options, but you have to. That's a bit of a challenge to get exit working. So we have some mechanisms to secure that connection, but that's the way to get an automated data transfer into XNAT directly. There is another plugin called the DICOM DQR plugin. It's not something we use, but if you're interested, that's maybe something you want to look at for automated DICOM transfer, because it's designed to talk to PAC systems and get data across. How scalable is the platform? So AI's XNAT deployments are all Kubernetes based, so it's as scalable as Kubernetes in one way. On another front, XNAT can support having multiple XNATs talking to the same database. This is something some of the other nodes do. This means you can have one XNAT server that's ingesting the data into the pre-archive from the clients, whereas the other one's the one that's user-facing. There is some, I think this has to be investigated and set up, but it's something that it does support. So you can scale horizontally that way. There's a couple of questions I'm not too sure about, so I'll just try and my best here. So data sharing with internal, external clients. So we support Xsync to other XNATs if they support Xsync and the versions match up. And you can add a user as a collaborator if they have an AAF account. I'm guessing this might have to do with maybe trying to generate a share link that you can temporarily send to someone else. This is not something that's supported by XNAT at this moment. So the answer there is no, it can't do that particular function. So you'll have to download it and put it onto another cloud share service or use one of these two methods.
What if you have a project, you've shared it with other sites that can all log in with AAF, and you want to share it with your overseas collaborator? Can you request an AAF login for them in the same way that we do for our own?
Yeah, they just go through the same application process. It shouldn't be an issue. We just use AAF and stop there. There was a question about examples of non-medical imaging applications, and I'm not too familiar. I haven't seen any, so I'm not sure, but there might be. There's a question about contributing to XNAT. So I think I broke this into two categories because there's two different aspects. So the core software of XNAT is open source project managed by Flywheel, and it has a core development team that's elsewhere. So since it's an open source project, you can involve yourself via their Bitbucket link. They're pretty active on the Google groups. So that's the best place, I think, if you want to get in touch with them, that's the best place to talk to them. So the XNAT discussions Google groups. If you're looking more like involving yourselves in the Australian deployments, talking about the Kubernetes integration or integrating with Australian instruments and facilities, and also developing pipelines that we are planning to deploy, then the Australian Imaging Service is the best place to go. So the project's headed by Sydney. So the AIS admin Sydney is, if you want to talk about the general project, that's where to go. Or just get in touch with me. I'm happy to see what we can do or get you in touch with the right person. And there's a question, is it possible to transfer via Globus and Aspera? We don't enable Aspera on our server. And I think it's an option. It's a thing that's supported by XNAT, but we don't use it. And Globus, you can transfer the data. There's Globus services available at UQ and other sites in Australia, but nothing that's integrated with XNAT specifically. So I'd say that. And actually, yeah, that's pretty much the end of my talk. So unless if there's any questions, I think I'm done.
I think you had Aspera written somewhere.
Sorry?
You had Aspera written somewhere.
Oh, so it has Aspera options. It's not something we've enabled or we use. We haven't got a request yet, so it's not something we've looked into either. But it has some support in the system. Yep, Dom?
So for the Xsync, can you do this with 3 or 4 more sites? Can you synchronize between any number of sites?
Each Xsync, you can only have one Xsync configuration per project. So that project can sync from one project to another, but the receiving project doesn't have to have that configuration. It's only the sender that needs to specify that. So you can daisy chain it. I think that would work.
I think for the big projects that we've got, there's usually one source, I guess.
Yeah.
And then lots sites that we send into the source.
Yeah. So I might just repeat it into Mike. I'm not sure what's that. So can you send Xsync to multiple projects? So what you can't do is you can't do one to many, which is one project going to many different projects. But the Xsync configuration is only on the source project. So you can get one project to send to another, and that one can send to another one from there.
Anything in the
Awesome.
Q&A?
I think we. Yep, I think we've answered most of the Q&A questions. So we can call it a wrap. Awesome.
Yeah, so if anyone has any questions, once we've had a chance, then this video is going to be made available. But also feel free to shoot something either to the support ticket or to Aswin. His email was on that one of the frequently asked questions sites.
Do you make the slides available as well?
Yep, sure. I'll put as much of this information onto the documentation slide, but yes.
Yeah, because there were some great links in the, the different components.
Yeah. I think these kind of talks helps outline all the stuff that's missing on the documentation as well. So you don't realize it until you have to present everything in one sequence. So it's and a lot of the questions were very useful in trying to inform where we need to fill out more information. So that's our top priority now. Thanks everyone.
So I'm also hoping that we have a couple of, apart from the whole video, we have a couple of really short how-to that, we just basically cut and paste. Here's how you download it. Here's how you do something else. So those resources will be available as well.
Yeah, that sounds good. Yeah.
All right, if there is no other questions, maybe we can wrap up the training. Thank you very much, Aswin. Thank you, Katie, and thanks everyone for joining us either online or in person at UQ CCR. Thank you and have a great day.